Have you ever had a week or even a day where things just start to go wrong or just not right? And it feels like you must fight your way through to get anything accomplished, even the little things. Some days, even some years, seem to be filled with only obstacles. You know that feeling. When it seems the whole world is working against you on a personal level and a cosmic one. The week before last, our kiddo broke his front tooth. Yes, it was an adult tooth. And then he broke his bed. Yes, he is growing. And I found myself just waiting for the next thing to break. Because though I am not particularly superstitious, everyone knows that bad things happen in three. And despair can be like that, keeping us focused on what is broken and wrong in the world, dumbfounded, waiting for the next thing to break, stuck in fear, worried about what is out there and what is going to go wrong next. All you have to do is turn on the news or read the headlines for any given week to find evidence that things are going terribly wrong in the world. From deadly shootings, unjust wars, good people becoming victims of circumstances beyond their control, it is more than easy. It might even seem most logical to lose hope, to just lament all that is wrong, to just give up on this crazy world. Especially when the despair is personal, when the hurt touches you directly, when it wounds those you love. What choices can you make when that happens and the grief has enveloped you and yours? What can save us in those moments? In the fall of 1831, the Choctaw people, whose ancestral homeland spanned from most of central and southern Mississippi into parts of eastern Louisiana and western Alabama, they faced this kind of despair. When President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, giving the federal government the power to exchange native-held lands for lands to the west, in present-day Oklahoma. The law required the government to negotiate removal treaties fairly, voluntarily, and peacefully. However, President Jackson and his government frequently ignored the letter of the law and forced Native Americans to vacate lands they had lived on for generations. Approximately 15,000 Choctaws made the trip between 1831 and 33. 1/4 to 1/3 of them perished from disease, starvation, exposure, and murder. They called it Trail of Tears and Death, which is why we know this ethnic cleansing today by the name Trail of Tears. The appalling conditions, broken promises by the US government, and the loss of their leaders and elders and children demoralized the Choctaw people. This Trail of Tears continued for decades. The last wave of Choctaw Trail of Tears occurred in 1902 and 1903. Despair and heartbreak. I know I can't fully imagine the heartbreak. Yet, just as the Choctaw were deeply grieving, struggling to rebuild their community, relocated to a new place where they were not welcome, they did something remarkable. News came to the Choctaw about the Great Irish Potato Famine and the forced land evictions in Ireland. The Irish potato famine was caused by a blight on the potato crop. 1/3 of Ireland's people were dependent on the potato for their primary source of food. And it was one of the first humanitarian crises that was publicized around the world. Gary Batten, the chief of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, says, When our ancestors heard of the famine and the hardship of the Irish people, they knew it was time to help. The Choctaw were deeply moved by the plight of these people 4,000 miles and across an ocean away. And despite their crushing poverty and the recent removal from their own homelands, they raised money. They raised $174, which is the equivalent of about $5,000 today, to help with the famine relief efforts. The money collected in 1847 made its way to Ireland, where the organizers wrote it had been contributed by the children of the forest, the Choctaw Nation. This was one of many donations made by the Choctaw and the Cherokee people to the people of Ireland. The words of Don Mullen, an Irish humanitarian, capture the remarkable choice the Choctaws made. The Choctaws had suffered a horrendous brutality at the hands of white people, and yet they could allow their humanity to supersede any prejudice that they were entitled to carry. In 1989, Don Mullen took a trip to visit the Choctaw of Oklahoma with the goal of thanking them and acknowledging their choice to help save others in need and to bring attention to this remarkable gift, this part of history. Although the Choctaw people he visited had no memory of the gift, it made sense to them. Mullen says, because giving and helping others is a big part of Choctaw culture. The people of Middleton, Ireland commissioned a sculpture aptly named Kindred Spirits to commemorate the donation from the Choctaw so long ago and their continued relationship with them. It is 9 unique stainless steel eagle feathers, 20 feet tall, and forming a bowl, representing the bowls of food that fed them and were given to them by the Choctaw. We remember those who stay with us in hard times, those who share their resources, those who stay and struggle alongside of us, those who save us when we are in despair. Then in 2020, 170 years later, the coronavirus pandemic arrived, and the whole world shifted and grappled for resources, for care, for hope. And the Navajo nations, well, they experienced one of the worst outbreaks of the coronavirus in the United States. A charity was created, desperate to help supply clean water, food, and health services to the Choctaw, Cherokee, and Hopi. When hundreds of Irish people heard this news, they knew inside of them it was time to return a kindness. They individually decided together that it was their chance to be generous despite their own struggles during the pandemic. Hundreds and thousands of dollars were donated, most in small amounts, from Ireland for the Navajo people. An act of reciprocity, sharing our puzzle pieces, trusting that we will have all we need if we share it. People saving people, that's the kind of salvation Unitarian Universalists believe in. Some of us may believe in a higher power or grace too, but we are soundly all in and knowing that we need people saving people. This is one story, but there are many more. Too often the story of how communities create hope in despair are not told. They are lost in history. One person is held as a hero, but the truth is there is almost always a crowd of people, a community of people supporting them, guiding them, offering strength, sharing resources in the struggle. This story is told by Jean Theoharis in her piece, The Rebellious Life of Miss Rosa Parks. In August 1955, Rosa Parks attended a 2-week workshop at the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee, on implementing school desegregation. Founded in the 1930s as an adult organizer training school, Highlander sought to build local leadership for social change. Rosa Parks arrived at Highlander in very low spirits, tense and nervous, she said, following years of political activity that had produced almost no change. Rosa Parks said, "I was 42 years old, and it was one of the few times in my life up to that point where I did not feel any hostility from white people. Spending 2 weeks alongside 47 others strategizing for school desegregation, it began to lift her spirits. She was in awe of Septima Clark, who ran the workshop, how calm, how courageous she was. Septima Clark had been fired from her job as a teacher for retaining her membership in the NAACP. Still, on that last day at Highlander, when asked what she would do when she returned to Montgomery, Rosa said that because Montgomery was the cradle of the Confederacy, nothing would happen there because white resistance was too high and black people wouldn't stick together. But she did promise to go back and work with the NAACP Youth Council. Rosa's despair was alleviated at that time by being with a community of people who accompanied her, shared her despair, gave of themselves, made a plan. And later that same year, in December of 1955, Rosa would refuse to give up her seat on a segregated bus. She was arrested, and her actions invigorated the Montgomery bus boycott that 17,000 others then helped make happen. This is how progress happens. The right people, the right time, with a plan, sharing strength and hope and resources, fighting despair with community. People saving people. We do this because we are connected. Our fates are intertwined. Their despair is our despair. We feel a call within us to do what we can. This is who we are. This happens in our UU faith communities. A story shared by Tarrant Strauss, Reverend Tarrant Strauss, the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta. Once upon a time in 1960 specifically, Ebenezer Baptist Church and the United Liberal Church, that's what the UU congregation was called back then in Atlanta, decided to hold radically integrated youth group meetings. At that time, Coretta Scott King was Ebenezer's youth group leader. The Ku Klux Klan called Ebenezer in the minister's absence and threatened violence at the next integrated gathering. Miss King and the other church leaders decided the meeting should go on, but they would advise the parents so they could keep their children home if they wanted to. No parent felt like they could keep their children home, and the parents of both churches surrounded Ebenezer in a ring of protection, facing outward. Reports are that the only disturbance was a group of men in a car shouting insults. It may or may not have been the Klan. I think about that circle, that ring of protection that the parents made, and how they were facing outward. They were protecting the youth group and establishing a safe haven for learning and worship. But their eyes and their hearts were facing out there, toward the greater city, toward beyond. We are not only called to create a force field of protection for those in need, but to listen well to our community leaders, to be there when they need us. We know how to provide care. We know how to feed and support each other. We have support systems and groups that are lifelines for members of this congregation, our members and beyond our members. We do this together as a community. It is an imperfect, but it is a powerful antidote for despair. We know this is true. We hear the stories from members about being part of Forward Scholars, Interchange Food Pantry, Defending Democracy, Earth Justice, Guest House Meals, and more. We heard this today in Tristan's testimonial. I have experienced this personally. This church, this faith community, many of you showed up to support us during the summer of 2020. That summer when we were all grappling with the shooting of George Floyd and the despair of so many, too many other horrific shootings, Jacob Blake was shot in Kenosha by a police officer. The city, the neighborhood I live in, was in shock, reckoning with the shooting and the explosion of protests and violence that took over our city. There were helicopters in the skies above us every day, and the press and an armed militia swarmed the streets. My partner, Eric David Carlson, and Reverend Monica Cummings and I were on the streets every day, trying to help keep the peace in any way we could. And as soon as it was possible to hold an organized peace march and protest, so many of you showed up. It was surreal to me at the time. It's hard to describe the moment. I saw Reverend Jennifer, and then I saw Trista, and Anna, and Milo, and Jonas, and Mark, and then another Mark, and Sarah, and Owen, and Maya, and John, and Omega, and Lisa, and Pete, and Deborah, and Jean, and Amy, and Pat, and Nick, and Nancy, and I know I'm forgetting some of you. I'm so sorry. All I can say is that it felt like a miracle to have you all magically appear there in your masks in Kenosha during the pandemic to help us, to stand up for justice, to be with us in offering needed moral support. How many of you have been saved by another? You know, in our darkest hour, in our most challenging times, in those moments, who has been there for you? What community connection has buoyed you through life's storms and traumas? Community can heal us. We know that those suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, are more likely to heal with interaction from people who care and listen. The most effective way to calm your nervous system is social, caring interaction. And the best way to reclaim your sense of power when you feel helpless, it's by helping others. People save people. We save people. We are intrinsically embedded. We are one, molecularly, soulfully, profoundly interconnected. We experience this when we feel a burst of joy around a baby, or a tug on our heart when we want to rescue a stranger in need, and moral injury when we feel helpless to care for another. Yet, knowing there is no us or them saves us, saves them, and maybe even the world. I believe that is why we are here. And that is why we are here in this faith, here in this sanctuary, to find connection, to be part of creating the beloved community that we all crave, that we all need, and needs us to do all that we can. The difference between falling into existential paralysis, staying in despair, accepting the chaos, or finding a way through is recognizing our mutual humanity. There is healing there. There is hope there. May we be that community for one another. May we risk being known, being flawed, being beautifully human together. Only together can we heal despair. Only together can there be a beloved community. May it be so, and blessed be.